That was the first, beginning of mac and cheese being available. And it was Europeans who came up with major culinary advances for the time, and somehow they just sort of mixed some cheeses together with some pastas, and voila, it was there. But if we go to more recent and more American vintage, it's Kraft. Kraft mac and cheese from the box, I think was for sure my first experience with mac and cheese. None of my parents made mac and cheese from scratch. So thank you, Mr. James Lewis Kraft, who was a Canadian entrepreneur who came to America, and he revolutionized the cheese industry. He patented the processed cheese product in 1916, and then his company, which he founded in 1903, Kraft Foods, came out with the boxed mac and cheese in 1937. And that was the first mac and cheese product to be sold in stores. And it became sort of an American, kitchen institution. It was very affordable. It was very convenient. Pretty easy to put that together. One of the movies that I watched for about the 15th time now, because it just keeps getting better every single time you watch it. But on the flight back, I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for literally like the 15th time. I do think that movie in his, repertoire of movies, I would say that is now a top 3 or top 4 for me. I mean, Tarantino's movies, I think Inglourious Bastards, Pulp Fiction are probably 1, 2 in some order. And now Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has risen to number 3. It is an absolute brilliant film that just gets better every time you watch it. And the last 30 minutes of that movie might be the best 30 minutes of any Tarantino movie that he ever made. But as part of the final 30 minutes, it's Brad Pitt in Rick Dalton, Leonardo DiCaprio's home, feeding the dog, taking a hit off an acid-filled joint, and mixing together some Kraft mac and cheese in a hot, he boiled the macaroni, and then he threw the cheese in there, and he mixed it up, and that's what he was eating. That's probably the first experience for most of us, I'm guessing. And then in my deep dive this morning, I came across the Stouffer's introduction of mac and cheese. Now, my father-in-law actually worked for Stouffer's in the 80s. He actually started, he had worked for Pillsbury, came to work for Marriott in D.C. That's what brought him and the family to D.C., and then worked for Stouffer's, and they were based in Cleveland, actually Solon, Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. And the frozen food industry really was the Stouffer's, sort of creativity and entrepreneurship in terms of launching a lot of what became, the frozen food industry. And their mac and cheese was introduced in the 60s and became a product, line leader, frozen food product line leader by the 80s. I mean, Stouffer's mac and cheese was creamier and seemed like a better product, I think, than Kraft. Boxed mac and cheese. There have been lots of other, products. Like I looked up Velveeta's had some market share. I don't even think I've ever had Velveeta mac and cheese. Annie's, the organic, the natural mac and cheese product. Annie's has made, a lot of inroads over the last 15 years in particular. But yeah, Kraft, it all started in America in 1937 with Kraft's boxed mac and cheese. And mac and cheese day. It's also Bastille Day. So happy Bastille Day. I was in Paris last week, and they were practicing for Bastille Day. And there were major fighter jets flying overhead as they went through their practices for today's holiday, which, of course, is kind of a national day, 14 Juillet. in France, and they are celebrating the storming of the Bastille, French Revolution, 1789. And today, on Bastille Day, France plays Spain in the first of two World Cup semifinal games. That is going to be quite the party in Paris today. Bastille Day with France playing in a World Cup semifinal game against Spain. Looking forward to that. I'm going to definitely be front and center at 3 o'clock. I wish it started later, but one of the reasons for starting it when they're starting it is that the European nations that are involved and the rest of the world, especially in Europe, has a better chance to watch it. You know, you start it later in the U.S. and it comes on much later in Europe. France, Spain, 3 o'clock from Gero World in Arlington, Texas today on Fox. France is favored to win this game. I have said since we started talking a lot about the World Cup, Max, and I've been watching a lot of it. There were 3 teams that stood out to me as teams that just appeared to be better based on my sports watching eye. Hardly an expert when it comes to soccer. France, I thought, was one of those teams. I felt like Spain, in watching Spain for much of the tournament, was one of those teams. And I really thought Morocco was super impressive every time I watched them. And Morocco, France beat in the quarters, and they'll play Spain today, and then they'll play the winner of England and Argentina in the finals Sunday in East Rutherford. And I will be there for that World Cup final. In talking to my brother last night, who's a major soccer head, he'd like to see England in the final, but he said, just so you know, if England's in the final, we will be standing the entire game. The English do not sit down during the game at all. He said that's just part of their thing. He said the French sit down, the Spanish sit down. He said even the Argentinians will sit down occasionally. But if England's in that final, just know you're going to be standing the entire game. And I said, that's not an issue. I would prefer to be there with English fans on Sunday as they try to win their first World Cup since 1966. Do you have a pick in today's game, France or Spain?
You're asking me to pick against France on Bastille Day, Kevin. I simply cannot do that.
Tough to do. I'll take Spain.
All right.
What am I getting? I haven't even looked at. I've made one World Cup wager, and that was betting Belgium plus 180 in regulation last week after the Balogun.
Plus 126 for Spain.
They're plus 126
to qualify for the next round.
Yeah,
So
to win in
PKs.
regulation, they're plus 228. Spain is.
Some value. I won't be touching it, but
I'll tell you, the Argentina game is essentially a pick'em.
Ooh.
With England. I mean, England is a slight favorite. Plus 155 regulation. Argentina's plus 199. I mean, I'm seeing sort of a blended odds thing. I'll take Spain and England. I'll take Spain today.
Ooh.
I don't know why. I just have a feeling Spain wins today. I'll tell you what would be really, really good for these two games, because I do anticipate major audiences in North America, in the States, for these two games, despite the start time. Over 50 million for U.S. Belgium last week in the round of 16 is just insane. Insane. Not even the most optimistic of soccer, heads would have ever predicted over 50 million viewers for a soccer game in the United States. And the night before that was England-Mexico, and that game did over 46 million in terms of viewers. But the 3 o'clock start time kind of hurts a little bit, but I'm going to guess that this is going to do a massive number. And I think for the sport here, just thinking from our standpoint, American standpoint, you need a clean and a very action-packed game with goals, of course, but you need opportunities. Part of the problem with this sport for a lot of us, it's not really the lack of scoring as much as it is the lack of near scoring. There's just not a lot of near scoring. And I'm not saying in every game, and I think we've seen some of the most exciting games that I've ever seen watching soccer in this World Cup. And I think a lot of World Cup, people who have followed this thing forever will tell you this has been one of the most entertaining World Cup, events ever, with some of the real memorable games. I mean, England, Mexico for sure, one of the all-time games. The comeback by Argentina last week, one of the all-time games. But I think you need less kind of defensive standing around, kicking it back and forth, going backwards, being super patient, waiting for a mistake defensively. You need near goals. You need the set pieces on the corner kicks to actually have a chance more often than not. I'm not saying that, you can do this. I mean, there's a defense and they're lining up to defend a near scoring chance. But man, that corner kick, I just can't believe how excited the announcers get for the corner kick and the set piece. And 8.5 times out of 10, it produces literally no drama at all. None. But the anticipation for it is unbelievable, but it just doesn't deliver enough. You need a lot of near goals for these two games to, set the hook a little bit deeper into the American sports psyche, I think. It doesn't have to be a 5-4 game. It could be 2-1, but we got to have some action. We got to have some legitimate shots on goal. Every 60 to 90 seconds, we got to have some action. Can't go 3, 4, 5 minutes without anything but flopping. You don't want that. I'm looking forward to watching it. I've certainly invested a lot into this, and I wouldn't have kept investing into it if I didn't really enjoy it. It's not for, this is not performative at all. I've enjoyed a lot of it, and I really enjoy just the intensity. And sometimes that intensity is at its highest before the game begins. Spain, France today, in Texas on Bastille Day, and on National Mac and Cheese Day. Man, there was a lot of follow-up on social media and in my little world of reading many of your tweets and emails on Jaden Daniels and his position on the ESPN quarterbacks list. We'll get to some of that follow-up next. Stephen Goff, by the way, from the Washington Post, the longtime soccer writer for the Washington Post, will join us from Dallas, the site of today's France-Spain game, at 12:35. So at the end of the show, Stephen will jump on with us and help us preview both semifinal World Cup games. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, and the Team980.com. If you need new windows, I highly recommend Window Nation. Window Nation's offering this month of July 50% off on all window styles, and they have plenty to choose from, over 1,500 window styles to choose from. You're going to pay half price on whatever you buy, and then on top of that, if you decide that you want to finance the purchase, how about no money down, no interest, and no payments for 2 years? So by the time you start paying for your new windows, it's 2028 and you've accrued no interest all the while. In the meantime, those new windows will produce lower utility bills during the summer when it comes to air conditioning, and the same goes for heating in the wintertime. Window Nation is the real deal. Their windows were featured recently on HGTV's Designing Spaces. It all starts with an in-home estimate, which is free of charge and convenient for you. Call them at 866-90-NATION or head to windownation.com to schedule that less than an hour in-home estimate where they'll leave you with a quote and then they'll leave you alone to make your own decision. I got this from Dave. Real quickly, before I get to what Dave sent me about Jaden Daniels on the quarterback list, what was your dental emergency yesterday? You didn't tell me.
Oh, we're going to do this on air.
My fault.
No, you're good. I just had a little tooth thing that there was a hole in my gum and I freaked out. Dental stuff just usually freaks me out in general because I'm very protective of my teeth and my face. But got that taken care of. I got an appointment in a couple weeks for a follow-up, so we're all good there.
Okay. Being in a dental chair is not anybody's favorite. You know, that's for sure. That I actually don't mind it, but I understand why it's a problem for most.
I just hate people poking around in my mouth, man. I hate it.
I wish you could go into the dental chair the way you go into surgery with just a little bit of anesthesia.
Every time I go in.
How many times have you had anesthesia?
I got my wisdom teeth out. That was the okay. And there was a surgery when I was really little.
But you didn't go under for that.
No, I did.
Yeah.
They put me under for that. Yeah, it was great. They gave me some laughing gas to start. I was super anxious about it. And then the second they gave me the laughing gas, I was like, you guys can do whatever you want to me, man.
I think they should at least give you the option of a small Valium that you could take, some sort of relaxer.
Please, anything.
Before you get into the dental chair.
A Xanax, something.
All right. I got this from Dave. And lots of follow-up yesterday to the Jaden Daniels conversation about quarterbacks ranked by ESPN. They've been doing the position by position. By the way, today's position group, off-ball linebackers. And guess what? There are a couple of names on that list that we will get to that I actually am a bit surprised by. But in the quarterbacks rankings that came out yesterday, Jaden Daniels was listed among the quarterbacks on the honorable mention list. Now, they spelled it out, Jeremy Fowler did from ESPN, that he actually tied for 10th vote-wise with Caleb Williams, Sam Darnold, and Jordan Love. And they kind of went to a runoff with some of the general managers that were voting on this. And they were asked, to pick one of the four for the 10 spot, and Caleb Williams emerged as the winner there. Jaden Daniels ended up being listed as the second on the honorable mention list. I took that to mean, since they weren't listed alphabetically, that he was the 12th best quarterback in the league. Sam Darnold was the first honorable mention quarterback. And we had a conversation about that yesterday. Was it too high? Was it too low? Was it just right? And where would you think Jaden would be on the list next year? I got this from Dave. I got a lot of this too. Dave wasn't the only one that thought the conversation around Jaden Daniels was a bit delusional. Dave wrote, Kevin, and I'm sure he's speaking about the fan base, have an inflated opinion of Jaden Daniels here in the DMV. He had one good season, and it was more lightning in a bottle luck as much as it was any kind of brilliance. Last year was a monster red flag on his ability to be available. He prefers to be a run-first QB, and that means availability will be a 50-50 proposition for the rest of his career. And if his legs are taken away from him at some point, he's done. The better pick would have been Drake May because of his body type. And I'm not even a big believer in him because he takes way too many sacks. He would have been among the others receiving votes for me, replaced by Bo Nix on the honorable mention list. Yeah, the honorable mention list included Darnold, then Daniels, then Love, Purdy, Mayfield, Lawrence, and Hurts. And then the last three quarterbacks were quarterbacks mentioned as also received some votes: Bo Nix, Daniel Jones, and C.J. Stroud. So he would have had Bo Nix on the honorable mention list and Jaden on the receiving votes list, which would have put him in that 18 to 20 range among NFL quarterbacks. So, look, I'm not going to dispute because it's more subjective in terms of inflated opinion. I don't know that we have an inflated opinion, but I'm not going to argue that point, Dave, because I think sometimes hometowns always tend to overrate some of their players, especially their really good players in comparison to other really good players around the league. But the idea that you think he had one good season and it was more lightning in a bottle luck versus any kind of brilliance is just, in my opinion, so way off. It was brilliance. Now, lightning in a bottle, it can imply that it was a one-time thing where he was brilliant. Your implication is that it was lucky, whether it was the opponents they played or some of the things that happened in some of those games, like the Hail Mary, et cetera. But no, this guy was truly brilliant as a rookie. I mean, it's going to go down as the greatest rookie season in the history of the league for a QB. I mean, during the course of the 2024 rookie season, Jaden Daniels threw at a completion percentage rate of 69%, threw for 3,568 yards, 25 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He had a passer rating over 100, had a QBR of 67.7. And then on top of that, he rushed for 891 yards and 6 touchdowns. And as we know, going through his game log in 2024, he was brilliant when the game was on the line at the end and they needed him to make plays. It started in the Giant game, week 2. They only kicked field goals, but he made a big-time throw to Noah Brown on the final drive to set up the game-winning field goal. Then in week 3, which was really kind of his coming-out party, the incredible 3rd and 7 touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin. That's a great catch. That's an incredible throw against zero coverage, all-out blitz, and he took a big shot. The Baltimore game that they lost, he was so good in that game and kept them, in that game and kept pulling them within one score. They just defensively couldn't stop Derrick Henry in that game. The irony of the Hail Mary game is it wasn't a bad game for him statistically, but they really were kind of fits and starts offensively. They couldn't really get into any rhythm, but still, the amount of time he created to allow the receivers to get downfield and then to be able to launch that kind of a pass was amazing. The Giant game, when he played with some sore ribs, was one of his better games of the season. I mean, that's why I always, when we go back to that, period in which people think he was playing with broken ribs, and he kind of indicated that, I have a hard time believing they would have put him out there if he was at any legitimate risk, especially given that they ran him a bunch the next few weeks. I mean, that Giant game, he had a 95.1 QBR. I mean, anybody that looks back and says, he didn't play well during that stretch where he banged up his ribs. Really? After the Carolina game, the Chicago Hail Mary, and then the Giant game was legitimately his highest passer rating game of the year, his second highest QBR game of the year. He was outstanding in that game. You go to the incredible throw that he made to Terry. They lost that Dallas game because they couldn't, they couldn't cover a kick in that game. The New Orleans finish, the Philly comeback, which was, probably the game of the year in terms of what he did in that game, throwing for 5 touchdowns. And they were multiple scores down, ended up winning that game against a team that was the best defensive team in the league. Sorry, but that's not lightning in a bottle luck. They played excellent defenses down the stretch. New Orleans, Philly, Atlanta was getting much better defensively. And the performance he put on in the second half and then in overtime against Atlanta was certainly legendary. And then the postseason, come on. Strapped the team to his back against Tampa and Detroit, 2 road playoff wins. That's delusional. And you didn't use the word delusional, Dave. Others did. But to suggest that 2024 was a lightning in a bottle luck season, as much as it was any kind of brilliance, is lack of either paying attention or any kind of legitimate football knowledge, even from a fan standpoint. Now, when you write last year was a monster red flag on his ability to be available, he prefers to be a run-first QB, and that means availability will be a 50-50 proposition for the rest of his career. I would say, yes, last year is a red flag. I don't know if it's a monster red flag. In fact, I disagree with that vehemently because of his history of being available for 52 of 54 college games and for all 20 of the games during his rookie season. Again, there's no prior to last year, there's no real evidence that this guy is injury prone. You can look at his body all you want and say, I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned the way he plays at the NFL level and whether or not he will hold up. But there's nothing in the SEC or in his first year that would suggest that he's injury prone. Even last year, not available enough. 100% right. And I get those that are concerned after watching last year. It's the most recent impression, and he just wasn't available. He essentially wasn't available for 10 games in total, and for 13 games, pretty much, in terms of start to finish availability. He just, cost them with his injuries a season. When you lose a player of that ability, you're done. And that's where I would also point to and say, your lightning in a bottle luck season, take him off that team and look what happened to the team in 2025. But it's not crazy to be concerned about his availability. It isn't. I looked at that body. It's the only thing that I actually hesitated on before the draft in 2024. I watched every single snap of his season at LSU in 2023, every single one. And I saw the way he played. And I saw the frame. And I did wonder, what if he doesn't get out of bounds? What if he tries to get that extra yard on 2nd and 6 in the first quarter? What will happen? But last year, we'll see. It could be a preview of things to come, but there's no history that says it'll be a preview of things to come. As far as prefers to be a run-first quarterback, that's just not true. He does not prefer to be a run-first quarterback. And in terms of if his legs are taken away from him at some point, he's done. No. He's an incredible thrower of the football. He has great throwing mechanics. He has great pocket presence. He throws with great anticipation, and he is super accurate. He is an excellent NFL passer. Now, would he be a different player if he didn't have his legs? Of course. Any player that relies on his legs and his athleticism for, a significant part of his game would be hurt. But he wouldn't be finished. Not even close. And as far as Drake May, because of the body type, yeah, Drake May's one big, thick man. No doubt about it. He is. I would not, at this point, take Drake May over Jaden Daniels if we could go back and draft again. I just wouldn't. I like Drake May. I do. I like him a lot more than I thought I would like him coming out because I liked Penix Jr. Second after Jaden and Caleb Williams. But I was really impressed with him, even though he was truly horrific in the postseason. But he's also a first-time playoff quarterback. I mean, some of the conversation about Jaden yesterday, it got a little bit crazy in the Drake May, Bo Nix, versus Jaden Daniels conversations, or Caleb Williams. None of those quarterbacks in their first playoff appearance played as well as Jaden did in his first playoff appearance. Neither one of those quarterbacks had a season last year like Jaden had in 2024. Essentially, your 2024 quarterbacks, Jaden can be judged on one season, impossible to evaluate last season. But again, the injury part of it is a part of the conversation. I get that. And in terms of clutch games and the most important games, Drake May gets an F. Caleb Williams gets a B plus. Jaden Daniels an A plus. My question to all of you in the wake of lots of conversation yesterday, and I'm going to give you a couple of back and forths between people on social media. My question to you is, do you think we as Skins fans have an inflated opinion of Jaden Daniels, or is it spot on? And I'm not suggesting that we all have the same opinion, but I think for the majority of us, we're very optimistic, very optimistic. We're believers that he is a franchise quarterback and borderline elite level when he is available. 301 230 0980, 301 230 0980. Do you think, as a fan base, we have an inflated opinion of Jaden Daniels? Phone lines are open. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. Don't forget, you can watch our show on our Team 980 YouTube channel. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, it's really helpful if you hit the subscribe button and you hit the like button. So there was a lot of back and forth on the quarterback list as it related to a lot of the quarterbacks on the list. A lot of discussion about how Josh Allen has supplanted Mahomes as the number one quarterback. Again, this is front office execs, GMs, coaches, scouts, all voting via this ESPN platform, sort of managed by, I think, Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, and spitting out the top 10 and then honorable mention for all of these position groups. I will share with you what the off-ball linebacker list produced here in a moment. By the way, Jeremy Fowler had something to say yesterday about Stephon Diggs and Brandon Ayuk. You'll hear that coming up on the show as well. So Ben Standig yesterday tweeted out something that got Jeremy Fowler to respond. He tweeted out about this quarterback list. Hold on, I had it in front of me a second ago. He tweeted out, "These lists are both fun and completely silly, but I'd love to know which GMs other than Brad Holmes is the Detroit Lions GM, would take Jared Goff over Jaden Daniels for this season. Not sure I'd need more than one finger to count." I mean, I kind of agree with Ben. Like, if you gave 32 general managers a choice for the upcoming season, Jared Goff or Jaden Daniels, I don't know if it's 31, say Jaden, but I'm going to say in the mid to high 20s, select Jaden Daniels. Well, Jeremy Fowler responded with more than you'd think. Now, that was it. And I don't know what Jeremy specifically meant. Actually, he did finally respond to Ben. Ben wrote and tweeted, "Goff finished ahead of Daniels among the sources polled. I get it. If the injuries are the deciding factor, can't argue, but that's more of a longer-term view, in my opinion. Either way, funded debate. Props on the survey hustle from someone who swims in those waters." Jeremy Fowler wrote, "Thanks. I expect Jaden to be back high on the list next year. The allure of Goff is 4,500 yards and 30 to 35 touchdowns every year. That's comfort food to many." Okay. Yeah. So maybe out of 32 GMs, Goff versus Daniels wouldn't produce 31-1, as Ben suggested, but maybe it would produce 25-6 or 23-8. There's no way Goff gets the majority of those votes. I don't think. I said yesterday, I think Jaden Daniels, for me, if I were putting together this list, would be either 8th or 9th. I'd have him, in front of Sam Darnold, for sure, in front of Caleb Williams, in front of Jared Goff, and probably even in front of Drake May. Man, I also like him a lot more than Dak Prescott, but I'd like to see, Dak's just never produced, consistently when his teams needed it the most, in my opinion. And he's been provided with a massive number of weapons. I don't think he could have done in 2024 what Jaden did in 2024 with Washington's offense. Just one person's opinion. All right, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Off of the email that Dave sent me, do we have an inflated opinion of Jaden Daniels? Yes or no, why or why not? And I'll read that email for you just one more time from Dave. Dave wrote, "Kevin, we have an inflated opinion of Jaden Daniels in the DMV. He had one good season, and it was more lightning in a bottle luck as much as it was any kind of brilliance. Last year was a monster red flag on his ability to be available. He prefers to be a run-first quarterback, and that means availability will be a 50-50 proposition for the rest of his career. And if his legs are taken away from him at some point, he's done. The better pick would have been Drake May because of his body type, and I'm not even a big believer in him because he takes way too many sacks. Jaden would have been among others receiving votes, replaced by Bo Nix on the honorable mention list, and that would be for Dave. Do we have an inflated opinion of Jaden Daniels? Phone lines are open at 301-230-0980. Let's start with Bay. Bay, go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning. What's going on, Kev? What's up, Max? Man,
What's
thanks
up,
for taking
Bay?
my
How are you?
call. Man, it's so hard to believe these guys, man, because they base it off the wrong stuff. No one's taking Jared Goff over Jaden Daniels. If Jaden Daniels had that Detroit offense, we would have won the Super Bowl, probably been back to back. We don't have the weapons Jared Goff got. Jared Goff got traded for a reason. And then for them to even sit there and say the things that they say about Jaden, about us being inflated about him, we're not inflated. We are honest about the guy. We talk about his injuries. We talk about him growing. We talk about him not having weapons. We talk about this, that, and the other. We're very honest about him. So when they say stuff like that about this fan base, it's because this team hasn't dominated like it used to. When they get back to dominance and we take that out their mouth, they won't be talking like that no more. They won't.
Thanks, Bay. Yeah, I do. I think that I think that man, I don't know if we're totally honest with ourselves all the time, me included, when it comes to him. But just sticking with what I believe to be factual, the 24 season wasn't, it could be a one-off, but it wasn't a one-off because there was luck involved with him. Yeah, he got lucky on the deflected Hail Mary, but he literally played at an elite level for the majority of the 17 regular season games. Call it 14 of the 17 regular season games. He wasn't, he wasn't great in the opener against Tampa. He wasn't great in that short turnaround first game at Philly on Thursday Night Football. And to be honest with you, I thought the worst he looked all year was the first half of the season finale in Dallas. Dallas kind of played him in a way in which he struggled a little bit, including the game at home, even though he put up some big numbers. Last year's season is the one that frustrates me for sure in terms of the conversation about it more than anything else about 2025. I just don't know how any reasonable person that watched the team last year and watched Jaden Daniels when he played could legitimately say he regressed or he stepped back last year. I just don't see that at all. I actually thought he was pretty outstanding. He started and completed 4 games out of 17. And in 2 of them, I thought he looked like Jaden Daniels from 2024. In one of them, it was the season opener, and it's always a little bit, choppy in the season opener. And the other one came 4 nights later against a dominant defensive team in the Packers on the road, short turnaround, where they were manhandled at the line of scrimmage, and he got banged up during the game. I don't see a step back. I don't know how anybody can come to that conclusion. And I promise you, as much as Dan Quinn's going to preach publicly, hey, we weren't ready, we didn't look good from the beginning of the OTAs, there is nobody out there, I promise you this is true, nobody out there that's lost one shred of confidence in Jaden Daniels because of last season. Not anybody out there. I think everybody out there believes he's going to have a massive bounce back season. I wanted to mention, too, Louis Riddick, who I've actually, over the last several years, he's really grown on me. For whatever reason, go back 10 years, I wasn't a massive fan of Riddick. I thought that there was more of him just trying to get a GM job, and for whatever reason, he was interviewed a lot, didn't get it. I don't know what the reasons were. I love him as a college football analyst. I think he's excellent calling games. I think he's really good as an analyst in studio, NFL and college football. The draft, I think he's really good at sort of evaluating these players. He did work in the front office here in Washington. And he tweeted out after the list came out yesterday, Jaden Daniels is still the best QB of the 24 class. So, ... He was a massive Daniels guy going into that draft too. Massive Jaden Daniels guy. We'll see. I don't think that 24 was a one-off, and I don't think 25 is even worth evaluating from his standpoint. And the great news is none of us really know for sure until they line it up and he goes out for the 2026 season. His third season, and a very important season, because the first time that they can offer him the massive contract extension will be after this upcoming season, going into his fourth season. And another season in which he isn't available enough would certainly make that conversation an interesting one. They don't have to pay him in the winter of 2027. It's just their first opportunity to do it. They could certainly wait until after his fourth season, but then you get into, because they'll pick up the option if they haven't signed him to a contract extension regardless. Like next May, when you can pick up the fifth-year option on Daniels, they're going to do that. If they have not signed him to a long-term contract extension, they'll pick up that option. But the long-term contract extension will, be driven by what 2026 looks like. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. I didn't watch a lot of the Home Run Derby last night. It was on Netflix. Not that that's a problem. I have Netflix. Actually, flipping on Netflix to watch the Home Run Derby, and I watched Bryce Harper's Home Run Derby, which was very exciting, but he ultimately did not get to the Final Four. But it led me to a documentary about the rivalry between Chris Everett and Martina Navratilova. It was about an hour and a half. It was really good. It came out, I think, this year. And they both battled cancer as adult women for many years now, and they have remained incredibly close friends. That rivalry is truly one of the great rivalries in the history of individual sports. I mean, it is way up on the list. They played 80 times head to head. And in 90% of those meetings, they were both ranked 1 and 2 in the world in some order. Recommend that for anybody that is interested. Very heartwarming too, their relationship as they've gotten older and they have battled cancer. They've really been close to each other as they've both gone through so much. And as of now, fingers crossed, knock on wood, they're both healthy, which is great news. All right, so we've got a little bit of news. I guess you could call it some news. Jeremy Fowler was on with the Junkies this morning and talked about a new receiver. Not that it's new in terms of conversation, in terms of what Washington may be looking for, but in terms of actual contact with said receiver. We'll get to that. He also, on ESPN yesterday, talked about Stephon Diggs and even mentioned Ayuk. This was Fowler on maybe Washington's interest in Stephon Diggs and a little bit on Brandon Ayuk as well.
I do see the fit in Kansas City because it's a team that's got an established quarterback that can deal with a big personality, especially a guy that's used to getting the football who, maybe would have to have a different role. And, for a little context, guys in the 2 deep at wide receiver in Kansas City, Jimmy Holiday, Jalen Royals, Cyrus Allen. Like those are the names in the 2 deep. Remember, this is a Kansas City team that did a lot of things on the defensive side of the ball, especially in the draft. And so they've essentially said we're going to rerun it with our starting receivers from a year ago. Who knows what's going to happen with Rashee Rice, what his availability will end up being for the entirety of the season. I think that there's value in Stephon Diggs in some role, a veteran receiver in some role, a team that's good with a quarterback that can handle him. So that's why Kansas City makes more sense than a team with a young quarterback, that's just starved at wide receiver that thinks adding someone with his talent and experience is helpful. So, I think it needs to be a team like Kansas City.
All right, so we're throwing out all these teams, but Jeremy, what are you actually hearing about the interest on Diggs?
Yeah, Laura, I'm hearing he's going to have a market closer to training camp. I was told that at least 5 teams that need a wide receiver have been checking in. Now, they got to deal with some of the baggage and the headlines. They are what they are, but here's why Stephon Diggs, I'm told, is confident. He had 1,000-plus yards last year, really playing on a snap count of around 55% of the snaps coming off an ACL. He feels he's going to be better this time around. I'm looking to the DMV, Laura. That's where he's from. Commanders certainly need a receiver. I think they're looking for more of like a speed option at this point. We'll see. There are several veterans they could look at. I don't think it's going to be Brandon Ayuk at this stage.
Right.
And the Baltimore Ravens, they have really made a living at times signing retread receivers,
right,
veterans who are accomplished, who are in their 30s, who can come in and help.
Do me a favor, just so everybody understands. That was Tim Hasselbeck for the first minute on ESPN talking about Diggs and him believing that the fit in Kansas City would be the right one. And then Jeremy Fowler started with, he's, thinking that Diggs could be, he was looking to the DMV, but they also need a speed option. This is why, for me, there may be less interest in Diggs because they want a true vertical threat in their offense. Not that Terry can't be, because he can be, but even a more, threatening vertical option at wide receiver, which is why Ayuk made sense. Now, sorry, but Max, you jumped into my ear. Did he mentioned that he doesn't believe Ayuk's an option at this stage. Can you just play the Fowler portion of that again for everybody?
Run it back right here.
Yeah, so
All right, so we're throwing out all these teams, but Jeremy, what are you actually hearing about the interest on Diggs?
Yeah, Laura, I'm hearing he's going to have a market closer to training camp. I was told that at least 5 teams that need a wide receiver have been checking in. Now, they got to deal with some of the baggage and the headlines. They are what they are. But here's why Stephon Diggs, I'm told, is confident. He had 1,000+ yards last year, really playing on a snap count of around 55% of the snaps coming off an ACL. He feels he's going to be better this time around. I'm looking to the DMV, Laura. That's where he's from. Commanders certainly need a receiver. I think they're looking for more of like a speed option at this point. We'll see. There are several veterans they could look at. I don't think it's going to be Brandon Ayuk at this stage.
Right.
And the Baltimore Ravens, they have really made a living at times signing retread receivers,
right,
veterans who are accomplished, who are in their 30s, who can come in and help.
Okay, there you go. The 2 things from Jeremy Fowler yesterday on ESPN is that he's looking to the DMV as a possibility for Diggs. 5 teams are interested. Diggs feels like, he had a good season last year coming off an ACL year and didn't have even the snap counts that maybe he wanted. And then you got from Jeremy Fowler there that he doesn't think it's going to be Ayuk to Washington. Yeah, I mean, you know where I am on Ayuk, and if you don't, I'm out. I think it's a big no for me, and I would bet that the odds are tilted very heavily in the no category for Washington as well. But like I've said, with these situations, subject to change, because he could go on some big, contrition tour and do the, adult thing, which is to get reinstated and then to approach his current employer with real representation, face-to-face, man-to-man, men-to-men, in a more professional environment than he's been playing in his sandbox over the last 5 to 6 weeks. And the opinion on him could change. These teams in this league and in every sports league, they give talent opportunities and then second chances and then third, fourth, and fifth chances. So I don't think he's done from the NFL. That just doesn't sort of make sense with what we've seen historically. There have been players that have done and behaved a lot worse than Brandon Ayuk. Now, he has sabotaged himself in a major way here over the last 5 to 6 weeks. We have rarely seen something so easily controllable get out of hand from a self-destruction standpoint with him. But things can change. Now, I have not heard this Jeremy Fowler from his appearance this morning, correct, Max, on the Junkies?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Jeremy Fowler was on this morning with the Junkies, correct?
He sure was.
Okay, so let's play that. I want to hear what he said.
Yeah, so Washington is certainly on the radar for a receiver. It's been hard to identify which one. It's kind of been a moving target. I think the Brandon Ayuk ship has sailed. I think. I mean, I'll never say never. Maybe he can sort of rebuild his image here a little bit in the next few months, but it looks bigger than football at this point with some of what's going on there. So I'd be surprised if Adam Peters went that route. The problem is, in talking to some people there, I get the sense that they really would like a speed guy. They got Antonio Williams and Lane, I believe. Some of the young guys can play in the slot a little bit. And they got McLaurin, who can still run. But you could use another outside speed guy. But there's not much out there in free agency. Like Diggs at this stage I think he can still be really productive, but he's not a burner, And I've heard Washington implicated to Keenan Allen a little bit over the last few weeks, but it sounds like nothing's going on there. So maybe that perks up. But, he's more of a true slot at this stage. So it's interesting. Like they've been linked to some receivers, but nothing firm. So, at the end, Adam Peters is still kind of operating in the shadows here. We'll see. I still think they could add somebody. But Diggs would love to be in Washington. I mentioned Baltimore mostly just because that would be a Baltimore signing, Stephon Diggs, somebody who's been in the league that's sort of a retread at this stage. Like they seem to lean on those kind of receivers with Anquan Bolden in the past and DeAndre Hopkins recently. So that would fit the mold in that way.
Okay, so that was Jeremy Fowler earlier this morning on with the Junkies. The highlights of that, Washington's still on the radar for a wide receiver. He believes the Ayuk ship has sailed. He said also what I've been saying and had just said, which is, things can change. He can repair his image somehow over the next, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks and go on some sort of an apology tour and take responsibility for going scorched earth on his employer, take some responsibility for losing $30 million to having voided guarantees, to videotaping himself breaking the law and then posting it on social media, all of the, shenanigans of Ayuk. He could certainly, because he's got great talent, repair his image to a point in which a team would say, okay, good job, we're on board. But he said at this point he'd be surprised if AP Adam Peters goes in that direction. And I totally agree with him. We've talked about this for a while. I think what they're looking for is more of a vertical speed threat. Sure, Terry can be that, but they really want somebody that will make it a lot easier for everybody else, for the run game, for Chigakonkwo, for Terry, for their slot receivers, somebody who can really create the kind of space on the field from the line of scrimmage going vertically that they'd like to have in their offense. And I'm not so sure that they believe that they have that. Diggs isn't that anymore. I would not call him a retread at all. I don't think Stephon Diggs is a retread. Guy had, over 1,000 yards in receptions last year with, a lower target number coming off an ACL. He was the leading receiver for an offense that was good during the regular season, really struggled in the postseason, as we saw, but got to the Super Bowl. Stephon Diggs is not a retread, but he's not the deep threat that he used to be. I think most people view him as more of a possession guy, but he is a big-time over-the-middle possession guy. And he could easily be that number 2 outside guy to Terry being the number 1. And his speed doesn't stink. It's not like he can't run. Keenan Allen's never been able to run. Keenan Allen is a big possession style target. I love Keenan Allen. Always been a big fan of Keenan Allen. One of the better route runners, one of the really good contested catch guys. Phenomenal as a leader and locker room guy. And, was part of the teams that Anthony Lynn coached in San Diego with Phillip Rivers at quarterback. So I don't, so he mentioned Keenan Allen as Washington's been implicated in talks for Keenan Allen. We've mentioned Keenan Allen, but it's the first time I've heard that there's been any conversation between Washington and Keenan Allen. The one name that is out there that was not mentioned in that conversation, and I've not heard this man's name mentioned in many conversations at this point, and that's Tyreek Hill. Now, it could be because nobody's really sure what kind of shape his knee is in. He had a very serious knee injury last year. And obviously there's baggage with him too. There's baggage with Diggs. There's baggage with Hill. There's baggage with Ayuk.
Well, so there was about a week ago, we got a little report. It's a NFL rumors thing, but James Palmer says that Tyreek Hill may not even be cleared to play at all for the 2026 season.
Well, there you go. That may be the reason there isn't a lot of tying to teams with Tyreek Hill. I didn't see that last week, but yeah, that's the list: Diggs, Keenan Allen, and Ayuk at this point. I think the odds are favoring now that Washington goes into 2026 with what they have. I think that would be the odds-on favorite, not an overwhelming favorite, but a favorite nonetheless. And then adding somebody else, and I'm talking about adding a name like an Allen, like an Ayuk, like a Diggs, before the season begins, I'd put that at less than 50-50 now. Man, Keenan Allen, just such a pro over the course of his career. But possession guy, and who's going to be the burner? Who's going to be the vertical threat? Is it going to be Jalen Lane? I don't see that. I don't personally see that. I still see Jalen Lane being much more of a punt returner. And I look at Keenan Allen and I think, and I talked about this with Ben yesterday. Do they view Treylon Burks as essentially what they would be getting at this point from Keenan Allen? Not that they're comparable players right now, but that they have a belief in Treylon Burks that he could become that kind of a receiver. Van Jefferson, the same thing to a certain extent. A little bit on the taller side, really good route runner, creates more separation, I think, over the course of his career than maybe he's gotten credit for. And there's no doubt that the off-season activity, one of the, things that we kind of learned through some of the interviews with the head coach in particular is that they do and were impressed. They do like and they were impressed with Van Jefferson. I would say right now, 60%, 58% that they go into 2026 with what they have now. Terry McLaurin, De'Ami Brown, Treylon Burks, Luke McCaffrey, Van Jefferson, some mix of that, and Jalen Lane, and Antonio Williams, I'm forgetting. So let's just say if there's 6 receivers, it's Terry, it's Antonio Williams. Those are 2 givens right now. Jalen Lane's a given, too, because of the punt returner. De'Ami, I think, is a given. That gets to 4. Burks is a given. That's 5. And then, Van Jefferson and Luke McCaffrey, I'll just go 6, 7 and just say those 7 have a really good chance of making the team. Ultimately, one may get injured and be put on injured reserve, and we'll see how it all plays out. But that's 58% chance from my standpoint that that's what they go into the season with, a 42% chance that they end up adding somebody else. And I think that the reason for that is the ship has sailed on Ayuk for the time being. Can you bring it back to the port? It's all on him. At this point with him, it's all about him. Is he going to do what it takes to get back into the league, to affect and impact the outcome that he has talked about wanting? The ball is in his court. It's not in the 49ers' court. I know some of you really think it is. It isn't. There are actual, things out there that suggest that the 49ers are fine with this right now because it actually benefits them from a salary cap standpoint moving forward. It seems to me like the ball is in his court. If anything is going to change for him, he's going to have to take action and stop running his mouth as a way to try to affect his own personal outcome. He's actually going to have to take some action. He's going to have to apply for reinstatement like an adult. He's going to have to be a man and confront the 49ers in a professional way, either by himself or with representation, which would be much, advised. He's got to make sure he's in the best shape of his life, and then he's got to consider some sort of contrition tour, apology tour about the way he's handled himself and the way he's attacked people personally and professionally on social media. There's always a chance with a guy that has that level of talent that you can repair this, but he has shown no indication at this point that he's willing to take action rather than continuing to pump out videos on social media. David Blau sat down for a long interview with Ari Mayov of the 33rd team. There were some very interesting David Blau, segments that we're going to play for you when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. This from D-Reds. D-Reds writes, Kevin, it's about winning a Super Bowl, not a character contest. Antonio Brown won a Super Bowl with an elite quarterback. I'll take Ayuk for a one-year deal and trust in Jaden, Dan, and AP building a roster around the Commanders' way. JD plus BA healthy will be unstoppable. Trust me, D-Reds, that prospect is what initially had me all in on pursuing Brandon Ayuk. But I do think that there is a level in which you can, or a line in which you can cross that makes everybody hesitate. And keep in mind that it's not just the questions of character, the questions of judgment, the questions of, bravery really at this point, and his inability to actually do adult things in a brave way to affect his own outcome. It's that he's 2 years removed from playing off a very serious knee injury. Some people don't even think that he's worth this conversation. I disagree with that. I think, as I talked about him in 22 and 23. I thought he was an elite level receiver and getting better. Yeah, the idea of Brandon Ayuk from 2023 and Jaden Daniels connecting is a very, very attractive one for me, no doubt. By the way, real quickly, who did Antonio Brown win a Super Bowl with?
The second you said that, it flashed the question in my head, and did he win it with the Steelers?
No. Steelers lost the Super Bowl to the Packers when he was on the team. He was not on the team that beat the Cardinals. No way was he in the league then. Was he?
Was he on that Bucs team? I think he was on that Bucs team that year. And then the
Bucs team with Brady.
And was the next year the year where he took all his pads off and ran off the field? Was that the next year? Okay.
Yep, my fault. I was thinking of Roethlisberger. He did not win one in Pittsburgh. He was on the 2020 Buccaneer team. All right. David Blau sat down with Ari Mayov. Ari Mayov is an NFL insider. What is it?
Ari Mayrov.
Ari Mayrov. What did I say?
Mayov.
Okay. Ari Mayrov. I've seen this guy on social media. I don't know really who he is, but he's an NFL insider, his ex-bio says, for the 33rd team. And somehow he was able to wrangle David Blau for a pretty long interview.
Like 45 minutes.
How much?
He sat down for like 45 solid minutes.
It's a lot of time David Blau's giving a national reporter. Noted. We will pursue. But there were 3 cuts that we wanted to play for you that we thought were interesting from this interview with David Blau. And they're all sizable sound cuts, meaning 1.5 minutes to as much as 3 minutes. But I think they're worthwhile for everybody to listen to. He said a lot, about his time breaking into Washington staff. We're going to focus on these 3 because I think they're worthwhile to play. This was Blau on this Ari Mayrov podcast on the development of opportunities and the opportunities that were presented to him by Dan Quinn and how he developed because of it.
So I want to ask you about that because Dan Quinn has been so big for your coaching career. So even though your title was assistant quarterbacks coach, it sounds like your responsibilities continue to grow. So what are some of those opportunities that Dan gave you behind the scenes that helped you prepare to where you are today?
Yeah, I think, going into the second year, because there had been some other potential opportunities come up after our first season with the NFC Championship run and helping Jaden in his, grow into the season that he had. And he said, hey, we're going to keep you here in Washington. Like, we're going to shut anything else down. We're going to keep you here in Washington. But with that, I'm going to give you more responsibility. So when it came to evaluations, it was evaluations of receivers and running backs and tight ends, not just quarterbacks. When it came to practice opportunities, he allowed me to call the 2-minute drill for the scout team in the practice. So you get used to having the mic in your hand, and every other week he's like, hey, you're going to present on ball security. Like, you get up in front of the whole team, coach the whole team, and he does that with not only me. That's just how he develops coaches in Washington. And he's always said this. He's trying to create the best environment to play and coach NFL football. Like, the best environment in professional sports is what he dreams of. So he's trying to develop me just as much as he's trying to, help Owe come along as a pass rusher. So it's pretty special to just see his intentionality for every single person in our organization.
I know that the opinion on Dan Quinn from the fan base is mixed at this point. I'm still a fan of Dan Quinn. I still think that he is a tremendous leader. And I think that he can get it done for this franchise moving forward beyond this year. It is always interesting to hear those that are closest to him talk about him, because there's no mixed when it comes to how players and coaches feel about Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn is a great motivator, leader, and manager. And he has become, I would hazard to guess, and I think it's more than a guess, because I think we've talked about this. He is more of a CEO coach in Washington than he probably was in Atlanta. But part of those responsibilities are making sure that you are developing your coaching staff so that you have coaches when other coaches leave. And there's a lot of security that has to be there within your leader for that to happen, to give opportunities. Now, you're not giving opportunities to everybody. You're giving opportunities to people that you believe can grow in your system and potentially someday replace you. Now, the Blau cut that we just played also speaks to something with him specifically that a lot of us have been hearing since literally within weeks or months after he was hired. And that is, wow, this dude's impressive. This guy's going to be a coordinator quickly. He's going to be a head coach one day. And so they, after that rookie season, did not want him to leave the building, and he had plenty of opportunities to do so. They kept him there by giving him more responsibility, which, by the way, Blau has said that Kingsbury was on board with as well. Now, I'm sure Cliff went into 2025 thinking that, yeah, I'm going to be a head coach in 2026 if we're able to, come back and do the same thing again in 2025 that we did in 2024. It's not the way it played out. But ultimately, they were cultivating, grooming Blau for this job from within a few weeks after they hired him. He was the apple of their eye. This is why the elevation of David Blau and the hiring of Durante Jones are completely different inside that building. A lot of the fans believe, wow, he went with two unproven first-time coordinators. He's really on the hook. It better work out. It's got to work out for Durante Jones because that was a Quinn pick, and that was a bit more out on a limb when there were others that were proven defensive coordinators out there. But as far as Blau goes, he didn't have to stick his neck out at all. There was no limb walking to get to Blau. The entire building believed in Blau from the jump. This was always the plan, was to keep him inside the building and make sure he becomes the next offensive coordinator after, presumably, the thought was Cliff would be back somewhere as a head coach. And when we got to this approaching the end of this season in the offseason, they were going to lose Blau if they didn't elevate him. He'd be an offensive coordinator right now in Detroit working for Dan Campbell. And there were other opportunities as well had Washington not elevated him. Now, I think a big part of it was that they wanted to go in a different direction stylistically on offense as well, away from, what Cliff had as an offense, Please don't call it a college offense. That's not what it was. There was more RPO in that offense, and you'll see there was obviously more, or a lot less under center than you'll see. There was a lot, probably less no huddle, or more no huddle than you'll see. But they've had plans for Blau from the beginning. From the beginning. It's not the same as Durante Jones. Dan Quinn, if it doesn't work out with Blau, isn't going to be blamed for elevating Blau. Everybody else wanted it just as much as he did. All right, this was David Blau on the Ari Mayov podcast talking about blending elite coaching schemes.
I love it. Okay, let's talk about just this offseason. January 9, 2026, you get the news from Dan, you're going to become the offensive coordinator. Taking you back to that day, the emotions of that, finding out like, holy cow, I'm an offensive coordinator for this team, which has a very, very special quarterback, which not many first-time offensive coordinators get to have.
Sure. Man, I overwhelmed with gratitude, truthfully, for DQ and his belief in me. And then looking at the broader spectrum of it, you sit there and you think, okay, where do we go from here? And at that point, the creative brain starts rolling. Okay, what's the best I've ever seen it done? And different experiences come to mind. What are some things that I know that we have to have that Jaden does really well? And then how do we take this, what he's shown that he can do in 2 years, and take it to the next level? And so at that point, like all of us do, is we pull from our experiences. So I've been very fortunate, man, to have Dan Quinn pour into me and show me what it looks like to treat people, in the highest regard. I was very fortunate to play under Dan Campbell and his mentality and mindset. I was very fortunate to see the scheme with which Ben Johnson implemented, and Cliff Kingsbury and Kevin O'Connell in a season where we were 10-0 in one-score games in Minnesota in 22. And so I got the pull from all these different experiences of, I just listed 5 of the best coaches over the last few years. And I had got to see them all in those, respective seasons. And I start thinking, okay, what do I want it to look like for the 26 Commanders with a somewhat new coaching staff, and we'll have a new core of players. And then you start building, man. You start chunking, you look at it and you're like, man, how are we ever going to get to the finished product? And kind of the result I came to is like, I don't know if we are. Like, we're going to take a chunk out of it every day, but this thing's going to keep growing and evolving as we go. And hopefully, I read Tom Brady say it the other day, hopefully we're playing our best game of the season and the best version of ourselves the last game of the year. And so that's what I'm most excited about. And what's been really special is I've had this vision for it. Sure. But the players and the coaches have had the ownership to kind of, in a short amount of time, take it to the next level. So their buy-in and support and belief in what I've been preaching has, not gotten unnoticed, and is what's driving the whole thing right now.
He's had a lot of really good influences, obviously. Been around it, soaked it up, and he's got to put it, kind of all together. He said you got to take what, he believes is the best I've ever seen with the stuff that we know Jaden does very well. And then, work in the stuff that we're pretty sure Jaden can do very well, but hasn't done a lot of yet. And it's kind of the blending of all those three. I will say this, that, I hear a lot of discussion about how, and he said it right there, where more likely than not, it's, if Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams last year are a blueprint for what Washington's 2026 season will look like, with Caleb Williams going under center more, with a lot more play action, with the Ben Johnson offense, which wasn't smooth to begin with, but just got better and they got more comfortable. And as the season went along, it really became something. And look, they were able to take advantage of it. Sometimes when you have something that is going to be a slow go, and you're going to be better at this at the end of the season than you were at the beginning and the middle portion of the season, very often that means that, yeah, the next year is going to be the real good offensive year, but that year you may have come up a little bit short in aggregate over 17 games. The Bears, they got rolling after 2 losses to start the season, and they were in a playoff race. They ended up being in playoff games, and they were playing their best football at the end of the year. Do you remember that Sunday night game right around the holidays that they played in San Francisco where they could not get off the field defensively against Brock Purdy, who was just insanely great that night? I'm pulling up the box right now from that game, the Bears season last year. But man, that offense was incredible in Chicago too. 42-38, San Francisco, Sunday Night Football, December 28th. 42-38. It was an absolute back and forth shootout. 28-21 at the end of the first half. 35-28 at the end of 3 quarters, 42-38 final. Caleb Williams threw for 332 touchdowns, no picks, no sacks, and they rushed for 110 yards. And then Purdy was 24-33 for 303, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, 1 sack, and they rushed for 200 yards. I mean, the 49ers basically had 503 yards of offense. The Bears had 440 yards of offense, and they combined for 80 points. The Bears at the end of last year, that offense was humming. For Washington this year, you look at it and you say, you can't be so slow to figure it out at the beginning of the year because it's at Philly, at Dallas, and then Seattle at home. You don't want to put yourself into a hole that you can't climb out of, even if you think, hey, it's getting better and we're going to be really good at the end of the year. You want to be good at the end of the year. Of course, you want to be playing your best football at the end of the year. But you want to be playing your best football at the end of the year in meaningful football games. Not in, oh, we're 5-7, but we're really starting to play well. Or we're, 4-8, but we're really starting to play well. And maybe we can get to 8-9. But, man, look out in 2027. I don't know that there's much room for anything other than a winning season and playoff contention for this team. All right, there was one more David Blau cut from this appearance on the Ari Meirov podcast yesterday, and it was how he's seen Jaden Daniels from first impressions through sort of the mental adjustment to what he will be doing from a new standpoint, evolution. We'll play what David Blau said about JD5 when we come back. All of our Washington Commanders and football coverage on the Team 980 is presented by Xfinity. Score the most reliable Wi-Fi. One price, 5 years guaranteed. Xfinity. Imagine that. If you're using chat to research home improvement projects like window replacement, look no further than Window Nation. They're the real deal. Get replacement windows and doors without the hassle and act now before your energy bills skyrocket. The pros at Window Nation can help you get new energy efficient windows at a great price. You can get 50% off right now until the end of the month on all window styles, along with no down payment, no payments, and no interest for 2 full years. During uncertain times, one of the best investments you can make is in your home. Experts report that windows retain 80% of their value. Replace your old or builder grade windows with custom built high quality windows from Window Nation. Window Nation measures 3 times to ensure your windows fit perfectly and keep your home comfortable year round. Their installation crews finish the job in a day or less so you can enjoy the rest of the summer with minimal disruption. Get the windows you want to protect and beautify your home. Choose from over 1,500 styles and colors. Get the windows seen on HGTV's Designing Spaces. Those are Window Nation windows. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com to schedule a fast, free in-home estimate. So 2 more sound bites from David Blau's appearance on the 33rd Team's podcast featuring Ari Mayrov. Some interesting stuff from from David Blau about Jaden Daniels, like what was his first impression of Jaden Daniels.
I do want to slide back for a second. Just that first season as a coach, such a magical 2024 year. You're in the quarterback room for one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen with Jaden. When you first get to be around him, what stands out right away? And when did you realize, okay, people kind of think we're in a rebuilding mode, but this might be a little bit different?
There's one moment very specifically I remember. It was our first rookie mini camp practice after we took him. And when you cut on the tape evaluating those, top quarterbacks, top kind of 7 quarterbacks of the 24 class, you're like, man, this guy might be the only one who has the ability to flip the game with his arms and his legs, like in a real way. And there was something spectacular, like every time you watch the tape. And he comes to us, with the second pick in rookie mini camp, and he's taking his 3-step drop, 1 hitch, and he's throwing checkdowns to the back. I'm sitting there like, okay, he does it the first time. Then he hits a seam. Then he throws a stop route on the outside. And I'm like, man, somebody has really helped develop the mind of this young man. And he goes 12 for 12 and 7 on 7. And I'm standing back there like, does anybody realize, like, this is my first time on the grass as a coach. And yeah, I'm really thankful because I got to be there and see Baker, as a rookie, who was a number 1 pick. I got to see Matthew after that and Jared after that. And then Kirk Cousins, who, played at the highest level and still does. And Kyler Murray. And so I see all these number 1 picks. And we're sitting out there on this rookie mini camp. He goes 12 for 12 and, he doesn't even bat an eye. He comes back. He's looking for coaching points from Tavita and Cliff and myself. I'm like, yeah, we're going to be just fine. Like, we're going to be just fine. And, he has that hunger to get better every day. Like if you can impart something on him that will help him grow as a quarterback, you got him. And that's exactly what, my role is now, is to try to get us to, and it was part of why we hired DJ Williams, who had been around Drew Brees in New Orleans and Penix the last few years, and Danny Etling, who backed up Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson in his career. Like, we wanted to kind of collectively pull from our experiences of being around Matthew and Jared and Drew and Tom and Aaron to impart the wisdom that we've seen now on this young man to help him grow and become the player that we know he can be. I'm really excited for people to see him going into year 3.
I'll tell you this, David Blau gives you some really good answers, gives you some really good intel and information. I hope come September 13th in Philadelphia, he's good in crunch time calling the plays and developing a game plan for the opponent. This was the last one from David Blau. This was on Jaden Daniels' mental evolution.
To see it with the staff that you have, and there's some bright guys on that staff who are going to be known here in the next couple of months, I think, on that staff, and establishing the rhythm and getting everyone to collaborate. I'm excited to see it. I'm really, really excited to see how it all unfolds here this year. One Jaden thing, because we keep on mentioning just the excitement and the spring and all that. I kind of get this sense, David, that Jaden is entering this year with a bit of a "you must have forgot who I am" kind of mentality. Without giving too much away again, can you give us a bit of a sneak peek at what we can expect from Jaden as he enters year 3, now healthy, which is obviously very important?
Certainly. And, you know what, without giving too much away, I think he drilled it, man. I think he was incredibly frustrated with how 25 went after a fun 24, and he was ready also for a new challenge. So the conversations that he and I have had, when we get to sit down and I get to present new concepts to him or new ideas or new operations, ways to do things, he has just like kind of grabbed it by the horns and ran with it. And I think it may look a little bit different than he's looked the last 2 years, operating out of the shotgun and kind of in a no huddle system. So it may appear a little bit different, but you're going to see somebody who's deadly accurate, whose feet are on time and in rhythm. And then, the best part about it is, when we do call a bad play and it's gloved or whoever's got us covered up, he's got the ability to always kind of flip the game with his legs as well. But the challenge, and not so much the challenge, but the kind of the opportunity we've had is to kind of to challenge his mental a little bit as well, and to try to push him forward in that space. And that's kind of what is really stimulating him now. What kind of gets me out of bed in the morning is trying to present new ideas and concepts to him that will only take us to the next level. And yeah, I'm really pumped for people to see how much he's grown as a quarterback and certainly as a leader and what everybody can be proud of here in Washington.
September 13th can't come quickly enough. Real games, real conversations, no hypotheticals. We still have another almost 2 months of some hypotheticals, but I liked hearing what he had to say. I think you get a lot from David Blau. A couple weeks away from the beginning of training camp. By the way, Jaden Daniels, is one of the 4 quarterbacks featured on Netflix's quarterback series, which debuts today. This is the 3rd season, I believe, of the quarterback series on Netflix. The quarterbacks being featured: Joe Flacco, Jaden Daniels, Baker Mayfield, and Cam Ward. So we're going to get some fun nuggets from this show. Unfortunately, he didn't play in enough games, but we'll certainly get a lot with respect to the conversation about his injuries. I wonder how much we'll get about the conversation to shelve him for those final 4 games of the year last year. All right, when we come back, the latest ESPN positional rankings actually have a Washington player listed. We'll get to that. We'll talk World Cup in the next hour. Stephen Goff from the Washington Post will jump on with us at 12:35 from Dallas, where France and Spain play the first of 2 semifinal games. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So the ESPN list continues with off-ball linebackers. Tomorrow we get wide receivers, which, I would be surprised if Terry's not at least on the honorable mention, in the honorable mention section. Off-ball linebackers, no Washington player in the top 10. Fred Warner was 1, Roquan Smith 2. Carson Schwessinger, the outstanding rookie last year in Cleveland, is 3. What a rookie season he had. Zach Bond, Philadelphia 4. Jack Campbell in Detroit 5. And then no Washington player mentioned among the honorable mentions, but others receiving votes. Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner. Man, our fan base has a different opinion of Bobby Wagner than the rest of the league does. Bobby Wagner was still by far and away our best tackler on a team that was horrendous from a tackling standpoint, second worst in the league in missed tackles behind Cincinnati last year. Wagner's still out there, not going to re-sign here. But Louvu on the list, I still think there's a really good chance that Louvu proves that he can really play at a high level. He did not have a great year. No one did defensively last year. It was a disaster defensively. It was a disaster up front, especially after they lost some of their best players, including Dorrance Armstrong and Wise. And Louvu paid the price of having issues up front. I still think Frankie Louvu is a good player. I really thought there was a chance, that we would have, after 2024 in particular, that we would have been talking about a Frankie Louvu contract extension in the offseason of 2026, heading into 2026 regular season. But that has not materialized, and I'm guessing at this point it probably won't. And Louvu has a chance to go out and have a big season and then become an unrestricted free agent. You would not, more likely than not, use the franchise tag on an off-ball linebacker, because you then end up really paying way too much for that position via the tag than you would probably in an extension. But there you go. That is the now third player from Washington on any of these lists. Laramie Tunsil was 5 on the tackle list. Jaden Daniels, honorable mention, really 12th on the quarterback list. And Frankie Louvu at least got some votes among the 70 voters, front office execs, GMs, head coaches, and scouts. There you go. Wide receivers tomorrow. I'm always I'm always interested and curious to see what, the real inside the walls of these NFL buildings people think of some of our players. And the most debated player of the last several years among all of us has been Terry McLaurin. Many of our fans believe that he's been a legitimate top 10 high-level elite wide receiver. And others like me believe that he's very good, but outside the top 10. And among, the very, very good wide receivers, but not the elite level wide receivers. I would imagine he's not going to be in the top 10. There are just too many great receivers. And then when you talk about recent impressions, just like Jaden suffered from, recency bias, Terry McLaurin missed 7 football games last year and had the worst year of his career. So it's very possible he's not even on the honorable mention list and gets mentioned others receiving votes. We shall see. By the way, several of you have sent me the link to the Pro Football Focus rankings of the quarterbacks ahead of the 2026 season. And to me, it looks a lot, they look very similar to the ESPN list with a few exceptions, but Jaden comes in at 12 on this list as well. And what's written is injuries marred Daniels' sophomore NFL season as he couldn't quite recapture the form that earned Offensive Rookie of the Year honors in 2024. Playing in just 7 games, Daniels earned a 74.9 PFF passing grade, ranking 18th among qualifying quarterbacks, while his 6.7 yards per pass attempt ranked 27th. One of the biggest reasons for Daniels' struggles in 2025 was his difficulty handling pressure. Opposing defenses blitzed him at a similar rate as they did in 2024, but Daniels' PFF passing grade against the blitz dropped by more than 30 points. Opponents seemed content to force Daniels to beat them with his arm, especially given Washington's lack of pass-catching depth. A healthy Daniels still gives the Commanders a great chance to win every week, but he needs to be available for all 17 games. Yeah, I think you go back and you look at some of those, advanced numbers against the blitz, and you look at who he had out there running routes to get open. That was a big part of it in 2025. But yeah, he ended up being right in that same area. The interesting changes in their top 10, they had Allen 1, Burrow 2, Jackson 3, Mahomes 4, Stafford 5, but they had Jordan Love 6. The advanced numbers have loved Jordan Love for a few years now. He is, particularly impressive from an advanced statistical standpoint against pressure from the pocket. From a clean pocket, from a clean pocket, he's exceptional. Dak Prescott was 8, Drake May 9, Brock Purdy 10. We referenced that game against Caleb Williams and the Bears late in the season. Man, the offense was great. Purdy was exceptional. All right. I found this before the show began, and this is of interest to longtime Washington football fans. But CBS Sports put out yesterday a top 20 list of the greatest NFL coaches of all time. And there were 6 CBS Sports NFL reporters that voted on this list. And whenever I see these lists and more than one person participating in the voting on this list, I always do, wonder, okay, well, where will Coach Joe land? I consider Joe to be a top 5 coach of all time. I think borderline top 4. No worse than top 6 or 7. Where did he land on this list? Well, let me just, take it 20 to number 1. The first one that jumps out is Mike Shanahan is listed as the 16th best head coach of all time. And there are a couple of coaches behind him that are in the Hall of Fame. I think Mike deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Bud Grant's in the Hall of Fame. Hank Stram's in the Hall of Fame. And Mike at this point is not in the Hall of Fame. I do think Mike has a Hall of Fame coaching resume. But the 16th best coach of all time is Mike Shanahan. And then you get into the lower teens, and this guy popped up, and I thought a little bit too low. This has been a debate for years among NFC East fans in particular, but certainly Giants and Redskins fans. Parcells or Gibbs. Parcells had a winning record against Joe Gibbs. Parcells came in on this list at 13. 13. Bill Parcells was a great coach. I will still to this day say that Joe Gibbs has a better resume, and what he was able to do with 3 different starting quarterbacks to win 3 different Super Bowls is still something that should elevate Joe much beyond many others. But Parcells and his Giant teams did have Gibbs's number more than anybody else did, but Gibbs came in at 13. Then you get into the top 10. Number 10 on this list is Tom Landry. And then at number 9 on this list, Joe Jackson Gibbs. I as I was scrolling through this morning, I wanted to see who was in front of Coach Joe. I mean, the obvious, Lombardi, Belichick, Bill Walsh. There are many people that put in Paul Brown. Some of the names, but after that, Don Shula. Don Shula would be pretty much at the top of my list, maybe right after Belichick as number 1 overall. But Gibbs comes in at 9 on this all-time top 20 NFL head coaches list. Gibbs's 3 Super Bowls with 3 different starting quarterbacks is always cited as to why Joe is considered unique and one of the greatest to ever do it. Let's not forget that while people assume that the Hogs were a consistent part of the 3 Super Bowl winners and the 4 NFC championship teams, the Hogs changed a lot from 82 through 91. Jim Lachey was on the 91 team. He wasn't on the 87 team. He wasn't on the 82 or the 83 team. Jim Lachey was, in his day, one of the great left tackles in the game. Talent-wise, for a franchise that's had a lot of great left tackles, I mean a lot of great left tackles, obviously Jake, Lachey, Samuels, Trent Williams, and now, by the way, Laramie Tunsil. We'll see how long he stays here and whether or not he develops a Washington legacy as a great left tackle. But the Hogs changed, a lot. The running backs changed a lot. The receivers, Gary Clark was not a part of the 82 or the 83 teams, was a part of the 87 and 91 teams, and Gary Clark is very much in the conversation as the number 3 wide receiver in franchise history after Charlie Taylor and Art Monk. Bobby Mitchell's on that list. Gary Clark is on that list. Terry McLaurin is certainly climbing towards the top 5 of that list. But Gibbs did it with more than just 3 different quarterbacks. He did it 3 different ways, and the talent changed. They were all about, ball control and running the football on that 82 team. The 83 team became a prolific offensive football team led by Joe Theismann's MVP season with Monk and with Charlie Brown and with guys like Nick Giaquinto out of the backfield and their ability, obviously, to continue to run the football. But they threw the ball a lot more. Joe had his best year in some of the biggest games of his career in 83. 87 was, replacement players for 3 games, including the big win that they had over the Cowboys regulars for the most part. But they did it with changing quarterbacks during the season, from Schrader to just-in-time Doug Williams in the season finale and then throughout the playoffs. And then the 91 team is the greatest team in franchise history. I don't think there's a debate about it. You're talking about a great offensive team that was built on stretching the field vertically with Mark Rippon's big arm, an offensive line that kept his jersey clean, and receivers that could threaten the field vertically in Clark, Sanders, and to a lesser extent, obviously, Monk. But that team did it differently than the 82, 83, and 87 team. That team was, we're throwing the bomb. We're coming at you. We're going, and we can run the football too, and then look out because we're hitting you deep. And Mark Rippon still holds the franchise record for an incredible day in the rain against the Falcons, where he threw 6 touchdown passes in the regular season, and then they beat Atlanta in the playoffs as well. Gibbs did it not just with 3 different quarterbacks. He did it 3 different ways. He got to, 4 Super Bowls in different ways. He was the ultimate, what do I have? Let's adapt to what I have to get the best possible results. Many people are system coaches. This is my system. This is the way we do it. I don't care if my talent fits it or not. I'm shoving my system down my roster's throat. Gibbs looked at his roster and said, how should we play to get the most out of the players? I think that's Gibbs's brilliance. I think that's why he was able to adapt every year to what he had and then win with what he had. And I've said this many times about Joe Gibbs, and you guys all know this. Joe Gibbs's teams did continue to improve as the season went on every year. His December and January record was sensational. And it didn't matter where those playoff games were. Joe Gibbs won and coached a lot of road playoff game winners, including when he came back for the second time and won a road playoff game in Tampa in 2005. Andy Reid comes in on this list ahead of Gibbs at number 8. It's hard to argue that Andy Reid shouldn't be considered a top 10 coach of all time, at this point, because he's just won everywhere he's been, and he's done it with great innovation. And obviously he's done it in this iteration with Kansas City, where he's had his greatest results postseason-wise with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Andy Reid came in ahead of Gibbs, as did Chuck Noll, who came in at 7. And then George Hallis came in at 6 and Don Shula at 5. So already with this list, I've got 3 gripes. I think Parcells is too low. I think Gibbs is too low. And I think Shula is too low. Paul Brown at 4, Bill Walsh at 3, Lombardi at 2, and voted on by 6 CBS Sports NFL writers. Bill Belichick is the number 1 coach of all time. I don't have a problem with that. And I certainly don't have a problem with Lombardi, Paul Brown, and Walsh. But I think when you get to number 5, I have Shula in that top 2 to 3 mix for sure. I'd put Shula in there probably ahead of Lombardi and maybe just behind Belichick. But Gibbs deserves top 5 consideration. I think he does. I think I'd have him ahead of Reed. I think I'd have him ahead of Knoll. I'd have him ahead of Hallis. And I think I'd probably have him ahead of, man, everybody talks about Paul Brown. I just don't know enough about Paul Brown. As an NFL, fan, I certainly know enough about Paul Brown, but never got a chance to see him coach. Gibbs is closer to 5 than he is 10, in my opinion. I'll leave it at that. All right. We're going to talk some soccer with Stephen Goff in about 15 minutes. Something happened NFL-wise over the last few days that was stunning. More on that next. So the story came out the other day that the Seattle Seahawks are being sold for a price of $9.612 billion. 3 years following the sale of the Washington football franchise from Dan Snyder to a group led by Josh Harris for $6.05 billion. An NFL franchise will sell for, pending league approval, for $3.6 billion more. Do you think the 25 or so limited partners of the Josh Harris group were doing shots together when this came out? My God, a massive increase. We knew when the Lakers got sold for $10 billion, even though that sale was different because the cost basis of Mark Walters' purchase is less than that. He did not buy a controlling stake in the franchise, but that is just an absolute shocking number that Seattle, in a lesser market, from a size standpoint, from an attractiveness demographically, that the Seahawks would sell for $9.612 billion 3 years after Washington was sold for just north of $6 billion. The group that's buying it is the hold on, where is it? It's let me give you the names. So Vinod Khosla, who was a Sun Microsystems founder and was a limited partner in the San Francisco 49ers, he's the purchaser of the Seahawks. So a lot of people did think ultimately it would be, I think a lot of people thought that there was a chance that a Seattle guy, like, of course, Jeff Bezos. I was blanking on Bezos's name. Jeff Bezos the thought was that he would eventually buy the Seahawks and pay a ridiculous sum for them because that was the team that he was a fan of to begin with. But no, instead, it is Vinod Khosla who is going to be the new owner, pending league approval for a sale price of $9.612 billion, buying it from the family that owned the Seahawks, and that would be the Paul Allen family, the Microsoft co-founder. His sister Jody had controlled the team as the executor of the trust that Allen set up. But the directive was, when he passed away, that she would eventually sell the Seahawks and the Portland Trailblazers and donate the proceeds to charity. It's a lot of charitable investment coming after this sale. By the way, Vinod Khosla's wife is apparently going to be the person in charge of running the Seahawks from an ownership standpoint. Unbelievable price. And not necessarily a reflection of, private equity money or, foreign money, which was thought to be or would have been the driver of a much higher price than the $6 billion paid for Washington. No, this is someone who's been an NFL minority owner with the 49ers. They'll have to relinquish that, of course. You can't be an owner in two different franchises. And this was just a very successful, entrepreneur. So there you go. Seattle sold for $9.6 billion. Quite amazing to me. And look, you only realize that as an owner or as the majority or controlling owner if you decide to have, a liquidity event, a sale of the team yourself. That's not what Josh Harris is going to do. But Josh Harris could certainly now, with this price, many of those limited partners could look to sell at an increased valuation from what they bought in at to other limited partners to bring on. Now, that's all got to be approved within the framework of the ownership group of the team. But that is a wow price for an NFL team considering what Washington was sold for 3 years ago. You know, when they paid that, no one else was willing to pay it at the time, if you recall. You know, the Fertitta guy in Houston didn't think that the team was worth more than $5.5 billion. Others, Bezos didn't come to the table. Of course, you know, many people thought that Snyder would never sell to Bezos to begin with. And some of the others involved just didn't see the price that Josh Harris and his group paid for it. You know, it was a tough negotiation, and it was never final until it was actually final, and the funds were wired and the ownership transfer took place. But there were a lot of people in the moment that thought, hey, they may have overpaid for this. Yeah, 3 years later, who's laughing? Because what are they worth now? Washington's got to be worth $10+ billion minimum 3 years later. Not bad. When we come back, the first of two World Cup semifinal games today, France and Spain in Dallas. Stephen Goff, who has covered soccer for the Post for a long time, will join me live from Dallas to preview not only today's game, but tomorrow's game between Argentina and England. That's next on the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980, theteam980.com. We're also free and live on the Odyssey app. And don't forget, you can watch this show on our YouTube channel, our Team 980 YouTube channel. When you get there, hit the subscribe button and hit the like button. on Fox, the first of two semifinal games, France and Spain. Tomorrow, England and Argentina. The top 4 ranked teams via FIFA's world rankings are the final 4 teams in this World Cup. Joining me right now is Stephen Goff. Stephen's been covering this sport forever, many, many years at the Washington Post. We've had Stephen on the show, including recently right before the World Cup began. He writes now for Yahoo Sports. You can follow Stephen on X at Soccer Insider. And I loved your column, the way you sort of recapped the World Cup going into the semifinals, because I quite honestly have been into it in a major way, and I'm not a soccer guy, and I've watched a lot of it. I'm actually going, believe it or not, Stephen, to the final on Sunday. My brother's lived in Costa Rica for 30 years, and he's got tickets. Don't ask me how he got them, but I'm heading up to Jersey for the final, and I can't wait for it this weekend. But for those that, have tuned in, but maybe not to the granular level of detail that you have, give us the highlights of this first, month, 5 weeks heading into the Final Four, because you did a great job with it in your column.
Thanks, Kevin. It's been a terrific tournament. For all the concerns leading up to it, the actual competition itself has been rather fabulous. I mean, the matches have been great. There've been some good underdog stories. The host teams, host countries put on a good show. Their teams did reasonably well. But now, when you get right down to it, the best teams are still alive, hunting for the championship, and so that's where we are heading into the final few days of this 5-week tournament.
I think it's interesting with this sport where scoring's very low. Similar to hockey, not as it's more low scoring than hockey, but hockey has a randomness factor, Stephen, in best of sevens where 8 seeds beat 1 seeds, and it's a deflection off, a skate off a post at the wrong possible time, or a goalie stands on his head, as they say, and carries a team. And yet in soccer, where there could be some randomness, there really never isn't. Like, I went through the list of World Cup winners, and they've always been the powers that emerge here at the end, with a few, dark horses that reach the semis maybe. Why is that? Why do the best always end up in this spot?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's only been 8 countries that have won the World Cup,
right?
And we're going back to 1930. I mean, talent is talent, and certainly the powers of the sport have maintained their excellence, with some ups and downs here and there. Certainly Uruguay who won early championships in the World Cup aren't at that same level they were at the beginning, but then there's the decline of a team like Italy, which has won several World Cup titles but hasn't qualified for the last 3 World Cups.
That's crazy.
I mean, France has been a revelation over the last 25 years for the most part. So that's a little bit of an emerging side. But you usually get someone out of the ordinary in a semifinal, whether it's a Croatia or a South Korea, someone like that. This time, it's been pretty straightforward. The road here has certainly brought some great stuff and some upsets and a lot of fun. Here we are with the with 4 power sides going for the title.
Yeah, and in your recap, I liked the way you kind of wrote that the world was reintroduced to the Azteca. I was actually introduced to the Azteca, and that Mexico England game, in terms of crowd atmospheres, just the way it popped through a television set reminded me of like an LSU football game against Bama at night, in Death Valley. Like, it was insane. And there was incredible. I'm sorry.
The rain was coming down. And, the whole scene was pretty magical.
Yeah, and then Egypt leaving furious and shattered with that ridiculous comeback by Argentina last week. Let's go back to last week and go back to Monday night. I have read some of what you've written about the U.S.'s loss to Belgium and some of the big picture takeaways, but share some of why they lost to Belgium and what your biggest takeaways about U.S. men's soccer are.
Yeah, I mean, I think to put it in a nutshell, they won their first few games, and it wasn't just that they won, but the way they did it. They were very impressive, very entertaining, a lot of fun. And then you could say the same thing about the way they lost, too. It's like, not that they lost. It wasn't a shock that they lost to Belgium, but it's the way they lost. They were flat. They looked outclassed by Belgium, which is, a past its prime team at this World Cup. So, yeah, I mean, it started so well, but, really a sour taste at the end. Why did they lose? I mean, I think partly it is they were playing a pedigree program, a strong program. It was nice that they beat Australia and Bosnia and Paraguay, but none of those are championship contenders. Belgium is one of the elite European programs, and so they were playing a better team. And then you fall behind early, and we can't discount the fact that there were all these distractions, leading up to it. The players said it had nothing to do with their performance, but the expectations are high, and then you have the president getting involved and FIFA getting involved and a lot of controversy. So, I think all those factors added up and really played out in a way that really surprised and disappointed most people.
Yeah, the title of the story that you wrote in the aftermath was the U.S. men's, and I know you don't write the headlines, but the U.S. men's World Cup run changed everything, but the ending left a sour taste. So what did change?
I think there was a revelation in the way that they played and that they can play this way, with some style and with some great skill. And they scored a lot of more goals than they usually do. And they showed off some of the individual talent that was out there, whether it was Fowler and Balogun or Weston McKennie or some of the others. And they drew enormous audiences, TV audiences. So people had their eyes opened by all this. So yeah, it was definitely a positive sign until the very end.
What do you think, Stephen, about the future of this sport? We've all, of a certain age, been talking about this periodically over the last 50 years. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Pele with the Cosmos and Cruyff with the Diplomats and how soccer was going to take America by storm in the 70s. And I've talked over the last 2 days about the 50 million viewer number. It's a shocking number of people that watched U.S. and Belgium. And but, what does it mean? Like, is it a one-off? And we'll be back here in 4 years if the U.S. men's team is good, watching again? Or will it, actually develop into something between now and the next World Cup that's measurable?
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument that there's been measurable gains steadily for the last 25 years. You've gone from, a national team that for a long time struggled to get to a World Cup to where they're in a much higher position. You're in the sport's in a great place in terms of the women, who are the best in the world and now have a full-fledged national league. MLS has grown to 30 teams and is 30 years strong. Premier League is on every single morning for 10 straight months and gets great viewership. You can watch it everywhere. The crowds for international tournaments, for tours of big clubs are huge. So everything has risen. And this World Cup has certainly brought out not just people who have an interest in soccer, but just the general audience has gotten into this. And Major League Soccer still has a long way to go, but the sport itself, you mentioned the 50 million watching U.S. Belgium. Mexico, I think, got 50 million viewers or something, whatever it was. Yeah,
for that game. Yeah,
game against
the Mexico-England game did 46 million in the U.S.
I mean, that's unprecedented in any sport except the NFL, and there's nothing like it.
I mean, from just like my own personal feeling about whether or not this particular event will drive more consumption of soccer for me, I don't think it will. But I mentioned something yesterday, and I'm curious if you agree with this. You've talked about how it has grown, but will there be that massive incremental jump because of this event that will somehow have it, the MLS and the Premier League and La Liga and all of the, that when we get distributed that product via Peacock, NBC, et cetera, to a level that, is top 3, top 4 sports. I don't see that, but I do feel like that in addition to being ready for the 2030 World Cup, the qualifiers, the national team playing in qualifiers to qualify for the World Cup will become more interesting to me than the MLS.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the qualifiers now, I love the qualifiers. I love the qualifiers more than the actual World Cup to some extent. Going to these
Central
places
America,
in El Salvador and Jamaica,
right.
Everything. It's great. The problem is because the World Cup has expanded, it's not as hard to qualify anymore. So those epic U.S. Mexico World Cup qualifiers at Azteca or everywhere, they just won't have the bite or the importance they once did. But yeah, I mean, people are paying attention, and if they stumble on the road to qualifying, it's there's much more scrutiny than there used to be because people are interested.
So why does a country of 340 million people, with sports being an emphasis in this country, why can't the U.S. men's soccer team do what the women's soccer team has done and become one of the top true elite powers in the sport?
It's apples and oranges. You can't compare the men's and women's. The U.S. women launched their program when no other or few other countries cared about women's soccer. They gave women a chance to play. And through Title IX, there was the opportunity to play the game. So they started at the bottom floor and became the symbol of excellence for the sport. The men's, I mean, you're talking about every single country, almost every single country in the world takes it very seriously and has taken it very seriously for, 50, 75, 100 years. So it takes time. In terms of the population, I mean, I don't really buy much into populations because if you did, China, India, Indonesia would all be soccer powers, and they're all terrible. So, you look at some of the best countries that play this game, whether it's Uruguay or the Netherlands, even England, not huge population.
Well, do you have an idea on a solution that would lead towards elite level play from the American men in the future?
Yeah, I mean, books have been written about this, so it's not an easy solution. Certainly, the fact that so many American players are playing in big leagues overseas is a very good sign, and it should have materialized into something greater at this World Cup. If you look down the roster, it's like this on paper. This was by far the best U.S. soccer team ever, but ultimately they failed in a round of 16 game. So I think it's actually well positioned, and the player development has improved steadily. But yeah, you just got to find the right formula to make it all work.
All right. Before I ask you for sort of a quick preview and pick of today's game and then tomorrow's game, what's your favorite moment so far of the last 5 weeks?
Man, that's a good one. I mean, in person, for me, I was only at the U.S. games until this Spain-France game today. So certainly, I think the U.S. crowds and the scene and the atmosphere at all their matches was beautiful. It was a sight to see and something incredible to experience. In terms of the tournament as a whole, watching that Mexico-England game from Azteca was amazing. Argentina's comeback against Egypt, albeit under controversial circumstances,
Right.
was extraordinary. And then Cape Verde, people criticize the expansion of the tournament, and in some cases rightfully so. But then you got a team like Cape Verde, which made it to the knockout round and put a scare into Argentina. So there have been some good moments, and I think there's still a few more out there over the next few days.
All right. Who wins these two games and why?
I think France has been the best team in the tournament, and there's no signs of them stumbling. But certainly Spain could do it today. I'll give France the edge for sure, just because of their raw ability and the way they've been playing a little bit better than Spain in this tournament. The game tomorrow, Argentina-England. Argentina's been flirting with disaster the last few games, so maybe that fortuitous streak ends against England, which really seems poised to get to the final for the first time in a million years. My pick at the beginning of the tournament was France against England, so I'm gonna stick with England.
Yeah, I think I remember that now that you say it.
Yeah, and then in the final, I mean, I think the winner of the France-Spain game will go in as the favorite, regardless of the opponent. I think France is the team to beat. Just an amazingly talented squad that's playing very well right now, and seems ready to add another trophy to the case.
By the way, what do you think the best venue in North America, live venue for these games has been? Is there a favorite among, those that went to a lot of the different places?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, in terms of history and aura and mystique, it has to be Azteca, which for your listeners, particularly in DC, is that if you took RFK Stadium and you doubled its size and kept the same design, you have Azteca. The place has a soul. There's ghosts roaming around the place. It's pretty amazing. In terms of the U.S., it's hard for me to say it and attend many, but Seattle was awesome.
Yeah,
having a downtown stadium. I've heard great things about Kansas City. I think those would certainly stand out.
Thanks for doing this. I know you're getting ready for this game. I really appreciate it and enjoy it. Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime, Kevin.
Yep, Stephen Goff at Soccer Insider. France, Spain coming up in 2 hours. The DOC, Doc's in for Chris. I'll be listening. That's next.